by Paul, who was in Rome at the time during his first imprisonment, which took place at the end of the book of Acts. Paul was under what's called house arrest. Most of us, I'm sure, are familiar with house arrest. Maybe you've never been under house arrest, but the idea is not new. Paul was in house arrest, chained to a Roman guard, and house arrest again isn't new, but this is where Paul was, under house arrest, chained to a Roman guard. Colossus was a city in Asia known to the present day as Turkey. And during this time, people in Colossus had been brought to Christ, had become Christians, and the church was established there by Epaphras, who ministered with Paul. But Paul had been concerned about the Colossians and is writing to them about their spiritual warfare, though he has never physically met them. He's never physically met them in person, but he is encouraging them and writing to them about their spiritual warfare. And it is interesting here that Paul is writing to them more specifically about their present day battles of spiritual warfare. And what you find as Paul is writing, you see here as he is writing to the Colossians, he begins to let them know that there's some things that are transpiring during your time that I need you to take a look at.
Yes.
And so when you really study the writing of Paul to the church of Colossus, he is really talking to them about some things that we ourselves in this present day and age are dealing with.
Mm-hmm.
We're dealing with these following things that he's talking to them about. In other words, it lets us know now that there is nothing new under the sun.
Amen.
That the devil has the same old tactics back then as he does now. The tactics that he uses, in other words, are not any different, but it's just packaged in new skin.
Yes.
New words in a different age.
That's it.
In a different generation. In a new span of time. Therefore, it looks as if it's different, but the tactics are the same. The tactics are the same. And so, in other words, the same word that Paul gave to the church of Colossus, to the Colossians, is the same word that God is giving his church today. It's the same word. Somebody say the same word.
The same word.
It is the same problems back then, over 2,000 years ago, that Paul is dealing with. Those same problems that he's talking to. That same spiritual battle and voices that are speaking during the time of the church of Colossus is the same battles that we're dealing with today.
Yes, amen.
The same problems, the same spiritual battles. Number one, the spiritual battle and what they were dealing with of that present day was the evil of their day. Somebody say the evil of their day.
The evil of their day.
And what they found is that things were out of control.
Yes.
How many of you know if you look around, it feels like things are utterly out of control?
Yes.
There is so much evil going on. There are people killing one another, taking each other's life like never before. Our young people taking each other's life like never before. Early graves from 1980 to 2017 or 1999 to 2017. Come
Lord,
on, somebody.
Jesus,
it's
Jesus.
The evil of the day. So Paul first started talking to them about the evil of their day, taking note that it seemed like things were so out of control, and things felt like for the church of Colossus that they were so out of control till they began to get discouraged.
Yeah.
They were discouraged, feeling like things wouldn't change. They felt helpless, like they had no way of dealing with the evil or the veil of evil that had been going on in their present day. That's number one. The evil of their day is very much like the evil of our day. But somebody tell your neighbor, it's true.
It's true.
That the evil of our day
is
worse. These
worse.
are the last days,
Yes.
and God is coming back.
Yes.
Hallelujah. Somebody say hallelujah.
Hallelujah.
And so they were discouraged and they felt helpless, much like many people in the church today feel helpless, feel discouraged, feels like things are out of control, like there is no hope. But somebody tell your neighbor, there is hope.
There is hope.
Number two, the church of Colossus was saturated, all right, during their time with delusions of philosophies. In other words, during their time, it was not specifically the church of Colossus, but during their time, the time was filled with delusions and philosophies. philosophies or delusions of philosophies. And let me make it plain. In other words, there were ideologies.
Yes.
There were mindsets that were set up to say that there isn't a God. There were mental achievements. There were great thinkers that begin to go throughout the city and begin to give different ideologies to say there isn't a God. There were doctrines of men and ideologies that came up against the knowledge of Jesus Christ.
Yes.
And much like then, so is it today. People are carried away by every winning doctrine, carried away. People are believing things that are simply not true.
Yes.
People are believing different doctrines, and not only doctrines, ideologies. They are looking at themselves as God. How many of you ever heard of God consciousness?
Yes.
This is the understanding that in me, in my inner being is God. In other words, they are saying today that they are God. People who believe this, they believe I am God. Everything I do, I am steered by God in me. But it's not the God, the one and true living God that we know.
Come on.
And so there are ideologies that back then that were set up to steer people away
Right.
from God.
Right.
That were set up to carry people away from God, to cause them to have delusions of their mind, to cause them to think one thing, but they don't understand that it's really something else.
Yes.
That you ought not to be worshiping the creature over the creator.
Amen.
Because there is a creator. Somebody say there is a creator.
There is a
And so,
creator.
in other words, there is a war of the minds.
Yes.
There's a war of ideologies. There's a war of constructs of the mind. There's a war of religions. There's a war of understandings and things that have been set up by men to make people believe that God does not exist.
Amen.
To make people believe that they are God. To make people believe that it's all about energy of the universe. Well, guess what? God created the energy of the universe that you
Amen,
experience. God created the vibrations. Come on, these are different mindsets set up to take away from what we know about God. To take away from what we know that he is the one and true and living God. This is what was going on. This is the spiritual battle, or one of the spiritual battles during the time of the church of Colossus. Number 3 there was legalism. Somebody say legalism.
Legalism.
There were certain practices and certain regulations that people felt like they had to live by. But what really was going on is it was really religious talk,
Yes.
without the power of God. Are you with me?
Amen.
It was just a whole bunch of rules and regulations that people had to live by, felt like they had to live by, but there was no power. Come on, somebody say
Amen.
no power.
No power.